Welcome to the lecture on string and integers. This is basically a quick intro on string and integer. There's a separate section on data type wherein we're going to deep down into strings and integers, boolean and other data types. But for now, to understand variable, you need to at least have a basic knowledge on what is a string and what is an integer and how to print them. So for that, we will cover this topic of string and integer in this section. Okay, so if you go to the material folder, string and integer example, you will find the deliverable and the logical flow. So part of this lecture, we're going to create 3 files, and the 3 files basically have define a string and integer variable. We'll define string and integer, and then we're going to print them. Then we'll display string and variable together in one line. Then we'll add 2 numbers with integer variable. We'll do some add operation on the integer variables. Okay, so let's quickly do that. So I'm going to use the same folder, variables folder, and I'm going to create all the files here. So copying this file name, new, saving it, make sure it is in the variables, paste it in the file name, say save. Okay, and if you go to the folder here, you have a before folder. So every time you have a before folder, make sure the file is open up, and then you verify what is the code inside it. So this is basically a starting point for us to start writing the program. Okay, so now we have the HTML code ready, so we can start understanding how to use strings. So first, let's define a variable of type string. Okay, so I'll say name, John Smith, and I'm gonna have a message for him. If it's a double quotes or single quotes, then it is considered as a string variable. So you can say message is a string variable. And how to define a variable? You use a $sign. And how do you print 2 variables? Okay, you can say echo $name, and you want to print message in the same line. You use an operator called as dot. Dot is an operator to combine variables and strings together. It could be integers as well, and then you say message. Okay, so now you will see name and message as a value, but before that we want to have dummy text to separate the 2 variables. Okay, now you will have name John Smith colon and the message. Okay, so let's verify this, and as we go along we type more. Okay, so we have John Smith, this is a string message. So now we are printing 2 variables, right, in the same line using the dot notation. If you want to print the same thing on a string, you can use double quotes, and then you can remove all the dots. Okay, I'm doing the same thing, and here I can add BR. Okay, let's refresh this. Right, you have the same string. This time I'm using double quotes, and I'm using the variable inside the double quotes. Means you can even print a variable inside the double quotes. Well, you might be confused how PHP understand this is not a string but it's a variable. That's the value coming up from the $sign. The $sign is telling the PHP this is a variable, so fetch the value and print the variable. If there is no $sign, then it actually becomes a text. Let me show you that. So it becomes a name, but once you add a $sign, it becomes a variable. So now I try to fetch the data of that variable. Okay, let's similarly print an integer. So we're gonna say, let's add some heading here. Then we'll say now we'll say version of the PHP is 7.0. Let's try to print this variable. So I'll say echo version is, I can directly say version here. So one thing is, the variable need not have to be a string only, it could be any type, as long as it has $sign and it is a variable that is defined and has some value, it will print it. So let's verify this. So now you have two headings and then you have this PHP version is 7. Alright, let's try to change it to 7.3 and you can able to see 7.3. right? So it's very simple to work with integers and strings as a variable, and then you can assign string with double quotes or single quotes, and you can assign the integer values as it is to the variable, and then you can use the variable to print with the echo inside the double quotes or using the dot notation. Okay, so let's look at the next example. The next example is displaying them together. Okay, so let's display them together. I'm going to copy paste this. Let's do a sample 2. So let's combine them and then you'll see the power of PHP. So we have seen this $name :message. You can even say name $name. You can even say $language PHP, then echo. Right, so you're actually writing, you're writing English language, right? You're just reading it out as an English. The language version is the version value, right? So it's easy to see the power of PHP when you say you can attach strings, you can attach integers together. It doesn't really matter, it just understands everything. You can even, if you want to split this up, you can say dot and dot. It doesn't really matter whether you're using an integer to a string or string to an integer. It doesn't really care how you're writing it. Just you have to say what notation you're using. I'm using a dot to attach it and then dollar to specify it's a variable. Okay, so let's quickly run this and we should say combine strings. You should see the name and the value, the name. You can do this, you can attach the new lines, right? Then you have a string message, you have name John Smith, a string, and you have also attached an integer to it. So that's how you basically play around with strings and integers. So let's look at the last example. The last example is to add two numbers. So I'm going to add two integers. Use the same example. Example 3. Here I'm gonna have first value is equal to 10. Second value is equal to 20. Then I'm gonna have a total. First value plus second value. We're going to look at the operators later, plus operator, right? So as of now, just imagine we are trying to add two values. Okay, then we are going to print total well, that's the example of having a first variable, integer variable, second integer variable. I'll rename this to second, right? Yeah, Then you have attaching this to a total, and then you have a total variable. Okay, then printing the total, and we're going to attach heading to it, and we'll say add two values. Right, let's quickly run through this. Okay, so the addition is here. So it's very simple to work with integers and strings. This is basically a very quick intro on strings and integers. We're going to deep down into integers and we look into different values, plus values, minus values, what is the range of integers, and all those things in the next section. Okay, so that's all for this lecture, and I'll see you in the next one.